Now, next on the agenda, if I get the buttons all going right, we can have a little look at what my slide deck says. And we should be coming up to Eric. Eric, are you out there?
I am here, Dom. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad at all. Right, let me get back to my video. So as those of you who've been CDS regulars will know, we regularly have an update from the Streaming Video Alliance. There's a long history between the Content Delivery Summit and streamingmedia.com. So we do have a lot of focus on video delivery online. While we've already had two of his colleagues on earlier on today, we have Eric to talk about open caching and Streaming Video Alliance activities. Eric, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. I'm actually covering for Jason Tiebold, who's the executive director for the Streaming Video Alliance. For me, I've got a deck that JT has shared with me. We'll see if this works in presentation form. If not, I'll just do it. Sharing it. Are we good? Can you see this or no?
All good.
Okay, awesome. So JT normally is the executive director of the Streaming Video Alliance. He's off this week. He asked me to fill in. I have been, in addition to my role as executive director of media distribution technology at Disney Streaming, I've also been the co-chair of the Open Caching Working Group for roughly 5 years right now. Open caching is one of the many areas that the Streaming Video Alliance is focusing on. For those that don't know, just take a step back, recap what the SVA is. The SVA is a group of technology association really looking at addressing the challenges of streaming video specifically. We'll look at standards, we'll look at different best practices, we'll look at a bunch of different proposals from even technology groups like Apple and updates to HLS, and just try to come up with consistent responses in terms of how these different areas may affect network operators, content rights holders, OTT platforms, CDN technology platforms, service providers, pretty much anyone involved in the global OTT ecosystem is part and parcel with our environment of where we want to go and what we want to look at. It is the goal is to always have as much participation as possible, encourage these different perspectives, and engage with quite a lot of individuals. There's bi-weekly standing meetings for all working group activities. Some working groups, including the Open Caching Working Group, meet much more frequently than that. And then there's also quarterly, for now, face-to-face meetings that will hopefully resume in face-to-face in the near term. The SVA has about 100 members, but as of now, here's some new members that have joined this year. Just put them up there. I'm not going to read them all out. You can see them for yourself. But certainly continuing to grow, and as you see, covering a wide spectrum of different areas within the streaming video ecosystem. So real quick, the thing we were asked to focus on specifically for Content Delivery Summit was Content Delivery Groups. Right? The SVA is open caching. That is the group that I lead with Yoav Gressel from Quilt. But we also have Network and Transport, which includes Glenn Dean from Comcast and Mike Hughes from Limelight Networks. We have Live Streaming, which is chaired by Alicia Pritchett from Fastly, Dan Drew from Digia, and Patrick Gendron from Harmonic. And then Edge Storage, which is started as a subgroup to open caching, kind of stands on its own now, which is chaired by Dan Newman from Viasat. All of these are looking at different aspects within the space. Edge Storage looking at how can we improve home storage and how can we improve the last mile of caching and enable it to work in a closed ecosystem that is part and parcel of open caching and the existing environments that are out there. Live streaming looking at those best practices and those quality challenges that may come up from high quality live stream in real time. Also looking at things like latency. And then of course, networking and transport, kind of looking at the underlying layers and infrastructure within there, as well as broadcast. Open caching is the area I'm going to dive into a little bit more. And to talk about it, I can go on for a while, but I'll try to keep it kind of short. So the way open caching works is it's been an evolution of the traditional origin CDN ISP relationship. And, as we previously talked about in the previous session, we are looking at an evolution of that involvement. Yes, there are still commercial CDNs that will be here to stay. They're still part of that ecosystem that they're critical to how the internet runs. The Akamai's, the Lumens, the Limelights, the Fastly's. But in addition to those, we're starting to see an expansion of internet service providers moving into the caching space and moving into the CDN space. So for us, open caching acts as that evolution of laying those standards. It basically is suggesting to the ISPs from a mix of ISP, content provider, and CDN provider participation, ways to evolve current caching methods to include more necessary items for streaming, and to be more open about the specific standards and options that are being used, being a little bit more directional in the focus, but also open in participation and involvement. The goal is ultimately to expand the trust and transparency to those ISP edge caches, so you know exactly what's going on and how things are getting involved within the open caching delivery space. In effect, how open caching works, I have a couple of diagrams coming up that'll probably show it in a better way, but it's really composed of quite a lot of specifications. The major ones are request routing, which is our core kind of specification. It's been updated once, it's going to get updated again. It lives and breathes and includes perspective from a lot of different members. Distributed caching rule sets, and right now we look at that as content management, updates, configuration APIs, capacity insights APIs, detailed logging, always a requirement of any system, and certainly a core spec for us. And then of course that content management, purging engagement between different caches within a network, revealing and providing updates for different individuals within the ecosystem that we look at. Here's a graphic. So I'm going to pause on a graphic for a second and enable you to kind of see how open caching fits within the system, right? I'm the content provider in the top left. I use commercial CDNs in the middle. And from there, open caches can sit within an ISP and enable us to flow our content through a CDN, and then that CDN take advantage of an ISP's network to further penetrate and provide content at a higher quality with more consistency to those end users. Alternatively, I can also be a content provider that goes direct to those open caches, and that's the approach you see on the right-hand side. And in that scenario, it's ultimately me connecting with those ISP open cache networks directly that provide better performance to our end user. There's a lot more overhead. We're working on those specifications to try to improve that overhead. But at the end of the day, it's treating the architecture the same, the implementation style the same, and the interfaces the same. And the only difference is how an individual as a content provider may want to engage with a content delivery network and engage with an ever expanding world of access, right? As we saw in the previous session, it's constantly growing, constantly changing in that space. One of the things that we're doing within the SVA to kind of forward that is SVA Labs. So Labs for us is the umbrella that we use to cover all the new ideas and projects. Within open caching, we have 3 major lab initiatives going on right now. The first one is our configuration interface, which is a host of APIs. It's the harness effectively for the APIs that enables all the programmatic management of open caching nodes. So if you want to be a standalone open caching node, or you want to complement and participate within a CDN network, the configuration interface, or as I call it, the test bed, enables you to do that. It enables you to test, see what's going on, and continue to engage. The capacity footprint API is all about expanding the information available to upstream CDNs, to content providers from ISPs. It says, tell me where and what you have available for me to use. It's a bidirectional communication chain where one would query and one would respond. And it is something that very much fits into and builds on top of the CDNI and Alto standards that are out there, just trying to push forward transparency within the CDN space. The last one is configuration integration API, looking at all the different ways to manage cache configurations. Right now, if one were to go and set up a CDN configuration, you're ultimately going to have to do it at each and every CDN that you participate in. Maybe you build a connector that normalizes their APIs, but ultimately each CDN's APIs are different. IETF had some standards within the CDNI framework that defined some of this. And as part of the work that we're doing within open caching, we're expanding that further. Glenn Goldstein from Lumen is taking a real charge on kind of helping define and expand on that. You know, the goal ultimately for that configuration API is to extend CDNI further. It's looking at the areas that the existing CDNI configuration API worked and had good foundational influence, and then saying, here's more areas as a streaming content provider that we need. Here's configuration ideas that you may not have thought of. It's not just the baseline that we can look at anymore. The benefit for us and those participating in the open caching group is we're really getting to push our ideas into the conversation. It's a lot more engagement. It's a lot of openness, and it's consistently expanding and growing us to the point where the specification currently sits at the last update, I think sits at about 100 and pages and change, maybe even a little more than that. It's been a while since I read the exact last update, but it's certainly a expansive specification, and one that is all about extending CDNI and building on top of the IETF standard. Not building our own standards, but building on top of and partnering with the IETF where appropriate. The way to best showcase this is actually through a graphic. I think Glenn put this one together and we've kind of prettied it up over time, but Glenn's graphical skills here really help showcase the areas the SVA is participating in and the areas that are the core IETF requirements. And you'll see quite a lot of it is still defined by the IETF. How do you trigger different interfaces? How do you trigger updates? What are ways that the footprints are managed and capabilities are managed? What is the actual metadata? How would you formulate it and format it? We're just thinking of extensions on top of it. We're just looking at our standard specifications for request routing. We're suggesting an overview in our architecture. We're looking at the publishing layer APIs and how they interface and where they interface. You know, the area that we're working on now, the simple metadata interface, is really a shared perspective of the two different sides. We're trying to extend that with an advanced configuration publishing that actually has a place within the IETF spec for it. So you can build on top of it, but you can grow it further with advanced configuration options. In addition to that, we continue to kind of grow where we're focusing and what we're doing. So, going back. I'm going to skip because I have more slides and I'm just going to show them to you because I'd rather do that than go through the slideshow. So, you know, what it is and where we're going, all the different publications that we have. So these are all the different documents that we currently have going on within the open caching framework. We have our API configuration. As I mentioned before, there's open caching home storage, what we're looking at and how we're looking at things. There's API implementation guidelines, all the different ways you may want to implement an open cache framework and how you can set it up. And you can actually find out more by going to opencaching.streamingvideoalliance.org. Edge and 5G for streaming video. What are ways that we're maybe taking a part of that? Looking at Quick and the environment and how it plays into our position as the Streaming Video Alliance into changes that may need to occur with live streaming and OTT delivery, and ultimately those APIs that we talked about. We also have other projects in spec. So those are things working on documents. We also have live streaming latency, a quick POC, work that's being done in joint task force with the CTA wave around CDN tokenization. Ultimately, that goal there is to bridge the gap on a standard format for CDN tokenization, a simple, consistent style that works across each and every CDN, very similar to how the configuration interface would work. Our goal here is ultimately consistency, standard, set up once, deploy everywhere, let it work for open caches, let it work for commercial CDNs, let it work through internet service providers and even internal content management systems that you might be developing or managing yourself for content distribution and delivery. You know, the key thing I kind of take away from all the work we've been doing is we started with an open caching by establishing a framework and establishing a consistent architecture. We received word of ways that we need to find the glue between that architecture, and we've really worked on specifications that better define that glue. The key being that the CDNI specifications are still at the center of everything. IETF CDNI specifications are still part and parcel of every implementation that we do, and the standard that we always point to, and we're just looking at extensions beyond that. And we go and participate within those groups and pitch those ideas back. One other item I wanted to talk about is that API testbed that kind of helps that glue, helps bring it all together. It's been a partnership of a couple different teams. It says us as a streaming platform, Disney streaming there. I provide Big Buck Bunny. I don't know if that's really a streaming platform providing content, but it's there. It's in the environment. We have it. But really massive kudos to the team at Telefonica and the team at Broad Peak. Alfonso and Guillaume, who are represented there, have taken the open caching API components that exist today, have taken the specification we're all working on, and built a full test bed where anyone that wants to participate in the open caching ecosystem, any provider of open caching technology, any participating ISP that's starting to deploy their own open cache, or even any CDN that's thinking of getting involved, can validate that their setup works against these IETF standards, their setup works against the consistent configurations that we need for configuration management, and that you can ensure that open caching specs are being followed simply by the fact of your APIs are validated against this testbed. It's something really exciting to see in action. It is something for members only right now, but we do have ongoing contributions from ATEM, from the aforementioned Broad Peak and Telefonica, from Orange, Varnish, and Vecima. So it's an active project. It is one of 4 that the Open Caching Working Group in some way, shape, or form has kind of spawned out of, that working group and meeting on a every other week basis. For those that are curious and interested, Open Caching Working Groups meets every other Thursday. That's counter with a content management API, the configuration API. There's also the open caching testbed that meets on Tuesdays, I believe, and then Edge home storage that also meets. So, and also the capacity management, which we didn't even get into here. Ultimately, there's a lot of projects going on, all of them focused on openness, standards, and pushing content delivery towards a more ubiquitous space where every participating technology provider differentiates themselves based on where they're located, based on the capacity of their network, based on the health of their network, and based on what they're doing to push their own network forward, not ways that they're looking at configuration APIs differently or capacity information sharing differently. It's trying to move all of that into a more programmatic world where consistency, transparency, and technical dialogue becomes just a ongoing, consistent behavior that we all expect. Real quick, I want to jump back and just highlight some of the members. I got that slide a little bit further up and just wanted to point out some of our member groups. So you'll see here, this is all the different members that are participating in Open Cache. We are certainly looking for more content providers. I know myself consistently providing content is a lot. We do know that there are other content providers participating in Open Cache within the actual environment where those are currently deployed, but we're clearly looking for more to participate within the active working groups. That perspective is very important and something that you want multiple voices and points of view from. But clearly, a majority of major CDNs are participating, analytics companies, and ISPs. And then finally, I'll just wrap with a thank you. Kind of tried to leave it quick, run through it in 20 minutes, be concise, and then leave some time for questions, whether it be from Dom or from the room. You know, in absence of JT providing a broader, here's the Streaming Video Alliance and everything we do, hopefully a more deep dive on open caching and all the different ways we're forwarding projects helped.
Awesome, Eric. Thank you very much. Awesome presentation. A round of applause from everyone. I can hear it virtually clapping away there. Just a couple of questions. So we've got a couple of questions from Indra on the Q&A, which I think are worth bringing forward. An interesting one, with regard to data protection and privacy, is the burden of regulatory compliance still the same? I presume open caching is really a technical solution and the compliance issues are forwarded.
That is correct. Yeah, we're really looking at just the technical implementation plane of things. For example, logging was previously done on a built on top of a squid log format, but then using the IETF CDNI engagement methodology. We're revisiting that now. We may make some changes to the formatting and different examples that are acceptable within logging. The logging construct and the data that is captured within logs. But ultimately, when that data is shared, it is all about defining the technical framework. We really try to stay out of any of those specific privacy related challenges or issues. That's ultimately a company decision in a lot of ways. The only thing we ask is an ISP, when they capture data, capture as much as potentially possible. Our goal is to be transparent and clear and communicate back and forth through different aspects of the engagement chain.
Perfect. And another question, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you answer it. So is the SVA doing any work with regard to IP issues? Now, I'm not sure if that's IPR or IP as in the internet protocol, but feel free to answer either way. So,
IPR as in rights?
Intellectual property issues.
Yeah. So I start every open caching meeting with actually reading our intellectual property statement. So there's standards as part of the SVA that those partake in that have reviewed documentation and understand what they're partaking in and when and how. I'll leave that aside. That's an broad SVA board issue and presentation style, and that's more of an area that JT can speak to in detail. As for the IP issues, if we're looking at network related issues, absolutely. The capacity insights API that we're working on right now, that's really focused on how can we know what's going on individual networks at a specific time. It started as just how do we know how much capacity is available? Can network A tell network B, the upstream and the downstream, I have this much capacity, send me this much capacity. And then the upstream, the upstream say to the downstream, hey, I need more. Do you have more? That type of bidirectional communication is something that drove those capacity API standards and specifications. What we realized in doing the work for that was we're actually missing another critical component, telemetry. You need to understand what the health is like of those networks. Where are they currently consistent and stable and able to deliver traffic, not only from a capacity standpoint, but from a performance standpoint, and where might there be the challenges that exist within the ecosystem and the framework. And so for us, it really is taking each specification as it comes, looking at larger networks and broader networks, and asking ISPs and CDNs to ask the hard questions of, if you were to standardize this, because that's what we're doing, how are ways that you're going to get more transparent about it? What is the way that as the ecosystem grows and the internet grows and we need to deliver more and more traffic, as Alex talked about before, how do we support that? We can't all be closed networks anymore, and we can't all be closed systems anymore. So let's push forward together and at least have ways to interoperate and have dialogue and conversation that are all automated. So I don't need to pick up a phone, call someone at this CDN and someone at this ISP and ask what their capacity is. It's simply done through communication that's automated.
Okay, and the last one really from me, deployment models for
Sure.
open caching and so on. So presumably the SVA members are producing their own implementations. So it's down to an ISP or a network operator to choose which vendor to work with, or maybe they'll work with multiple vendors and they liaise directly with those vendors, or is there some intermediary relationship they need with the SVA as well? What are the sort of you know, as it starts to become a commercial play? What are
yeah. I'll dance on the commercial side because I don't want to get involved in there. It's not an area that we're currently getting involved in. We may come back with some things through the SVA of just recommended engagement methodologies. But for now, we're not engaging on the commercial side of things. For the implementation side of things, though, certainly there's a lot of different ways you can go. The ultimate key is consistent architecture. Right? The goal is ultimately consistent architecture. And we've defined what those architectures are. We've defined what those APIs are that you need to use. Now, if you're an ISP that has its own CDN and you don't currently support that architecture, but you want to be open cache compliant and the framework that the language that we would use, go ahead and read that architecture. Go ahead and read those specifications. And if you can support that approach, you can become open cache compliant in a lot of ways, because all you have to do is support some additional APIs and engagement methods. If you are wanting to deploy a new network and looking at it, there are a whole host of technology providers that are all talking to me and talking to different companies at different times that are trying to get their version of their caching software out there that's open cache compliant. Great. As long as they're open cache compliant, I think that there's a lot of work to be done. I see quite a lot of participation in the SVA from those different technology providers. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that type of engagement and perspective to drive things forward. At any given time, I think there's 6, 7, or 8 different ones that are kind of reaching out and wanting to talk about their technology version of open caching.
Sorry
yeah.
to interrupt.
No,
are there complexities, for example, if you've got multiple vendors in one ISP, all delivering open caching? Is there some way that, presumably each vendor's got some differentiated features over and above the open caching set and so on, but when a consumer pulls content, how are you going to make sure it comes through an open cache which has got the feature set that the user wants? I presume these detailed.
No, it's a great question, because I've actually thought about it before. I've been asked by different ISPs, hey, what if we deploy 2 different open cache technology stacks in our network? Would that help with redundancy? Because we have certain redundancy requirements at Disney Streaming. And it's a question that's interesting. I haven't yet come up with a full answer for 100% yes, 100% no. But what I would say is the work we're doing now on specs and standards, the work we're doing on the configuration API, the work we're doing on the capacity API, it's meant so that all of the extra technology that a CDN or a deployed open cache ISP network does, and 2 different technology providers in the same network do, they're the same, right? The interfaces to me as a content provider is the same. And that's ultimately the goal. It's consistency of interface. If you want to perform better by doing some special sauce on your side, great, let's see it. Let's see it in the performance, and then we can kind of evaluate it together and discuss it. But right now, I certainly would say that it is it's an open opportunity for different ISPs to deploy, play around with, and figure out what works best for them.
It's an amazing momentum that the open caching has built up, and it's been great to follow it. Over the last 4 CDSs, we've had updates, and it's steaming ahead. So all power to you, Eric. Well done. And
it's been a long road. It's been many years.
There's a lot going on your plate, so I don't know how you keep up with it all. Excellent. Well, a round of applause or a virtual round of applause for Eric, and many thanks. And I'm sure we'll see you again very soon, Eric. Thank you very much.